Hey guys, welcome back to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable. And this is the first, not first episode, but first episode where we're changing the way that we're doing things. And that was a really complicated intro. If you guys have been listening, you know I'm not good at intros. So of course, we have 5 people on the team. And as much as I love all of us getting together, it can be really, really challenging for our schedules. And I think it is cool to highlight different coaches and their different strengths and stories, etc. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is typically each podcast will be one, maybe even 2 coaches. Like today I'm joined with Coach Gillian, and then next week might be somebody else. Well, not might be. It will be. Plot twist. It will be. I'm just really messing this up. In any case, and then once a month we're probably going to get together and do like a big round table with a few different discussions. So if you guys have any topic suggestions, as always, please let us know. But we really hope that you like this new format moving forward. And really the reason we wanted to do this is because we wanted to get out more frequent podcasts for you guys and more information for you guys. So that is why we're doing it. And yeah, super excited. So today I am joined with Coach Gill, and we are going to talk about actually something that is near and dear to her heart because she's going through it right now. And that is long diets and long preps. And a lot of times, so I think that this is getting a lot better, but there's still the very typical like, oh, hey, I'll just do like 8, 12, 16 weeks seems like a long time to some people. It's very typical to do like a 12-week prep, right? Like I'm doing air quotes if you can't see the video. And it's something that has just been pervasive in the industry for a long time. And people think that they're actually going to get ready and stage lean in that amount of time. And there are a handful of people who might be able to do that. But for the large majority of people, particularly females, particularly natural females, who is the majority of our clients that we're coaching, you're not going to be able to do that. And some people are just more inclined to need more time. Depends on kind of where they were in their off season and kind of all these things. So I'm not going to continue blabbing. Give a little more background, Jill, about what you've been doing recently.
So, we've been in prep for about 29 to 30 weeks now, which is a freaking long time, but nothing that's new to me really, because my first prep was probably like 30 something weeks as well. So it's pretty typical for me to take a long time to diet. And I like to do this approach with my, first time competitors as well, where I play it by ear. I just want to start the dieting phase, see how they respond and get a feel for their bodies, just for the fact that I would much rather be ready and take a longer approach than to, give myself this 12-week expectation and be disappointed. So I have, a long dieting history as well, and that plays into this. So for me, it's just easier to take the longer approach and really just, tinker with things week by week and chip away slowly, just to ensure that I'm ready.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people hear is they say, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And here's the difference. Do you want to look your best and be competitive, or are you just trying to compete? And if you're actually trying to be competitive, you will do whatever it takes. And we hear this a lot. I'll do whatever it takes to win. And then you're like, okay, diet for 40 weeks. People are like, no, I'm good. You're like, oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's what it's going to take, right? And if you are, again, like I said, a natural female, who that's the majority of our client base, it's going to take you a lot longer. And the way that we are structuring this is hopefully we'll be able to do things like refeeds and do things like diet breaks. This doesn't mean that you start a diet and it's like, hey, 50 carbs for 40 weeks. That is not by any means what's happening, right? We've taken things very slowly, and now we've had to kind of kick it up a notch. And you've been in a place where it has been challenging for a little while, but that's just how your body responds, right? And not everybody is going to have this magic metabolism where you can diet and prep on all this food. And we see this a lot, and it's typically younger people who haven't had a lot of dieting history, and they might be 20, 21, kind of more ectomorphic. And they're like, yeah, I'm eating 300 carbs and look at my abs. That's not most people, right? And particularly for somebody like in your situation, your body is a little bit more stubborn. And every time that we've worked together for the past several years, this is what we've been up against. And then this off season, there were some other issues that you had that were going on. And even despite your best efforts, there was still a lot of weight gain happening, and there were some hormonal issues. And I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit briefly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we had a lot of like hormonal issues to kind of work through. I think a big part of that was, the birth control I was using, which this is an individual response. I'm not saying, don't use birth control. I'm never going to say that. But for me, the past 6 months on the copper IUD that I was using had, really upset my body in a way where I was constantly inflamed. I actually tried doing a mini cut in the beginning of the year, and my weight went up. So see, I'm like, my metabolism isn't the best, but it's not that bad, right? So that's kind of where we figured, something else is going on here. And I did a little bit more research on my end to really figure out, I'm controlling everything that I can, my diet, my training, my expenditure outside of the gym. And I just figured, it's time for me to kind of tinker with this stuff here, because I've had this IUD for a year now, and that's the only thing I haven't really touched. Obviously, because I can't. So
Literally.
So I decided to kind of tinker with that a little bit and take it out just to see. I was like, you know what, this is my, last thing that I can really control here. And it turned out to be a really good decision. The inflammation went down in just a matter of days. And then after that, I found that my body really started responding to what I was doing. So that doesn't mean everyone's going to respond like this. There are plenty of people who I've talked with who have the same birth control method, the copper IUD, who love it, who don't feel any kind of negative side effects. But for me personally, I felt a lot of negative side effects from it in the past 6 months that I was using it. So we kind of worked through that. And then, we hung around maintenance for a little bit. Training got better. I started to feel better physically. And then, we figured now's a really good time to just kind of like focus on something. Let's start dieting. And at that point, we didn't have any kind of deadline, especially since I was at a body weight where I wouldn't consider ideal for starting a prep.
You also were the one who brought it up and said, hey, like, I'd rather just do this as a real prep, and let's just consider that as a real prep.
Yeah, exactly. So, I always knew, we always kind of knew that I was going to need more time anyway. So starting early was, what, let's just do it now. We'll take our time and we'll get on stage when we're ready. So that's kind of the approach that we took. And I'm totally comfortable with that, because I know, at the end of the day, I'm going to get to where I'm going. Now, ideally in my head, I was like, oh, the way things are moving, what about the end of 2019? But obviously that's not, that's not something that you can hold on to. And I've found myself doing this with a lot of clients where, we expect to hit the stage maybe at the end of 2019, but I have to kind of talk to them and I'm like, you know what, I think we can really use a few more weeks here. And I know it sucks to push that deadline, but I would much rather you be ready for the stage than not.
Yes. And that comes back to, again, are you looking to compete or are you looking to be competitive? And this is why I'm so strong in my position on this, because the few times that I've done it with myself and with clients, it's always backfired. When I say, hey, I'm going to do this show, I'm committing to it at the beginning of my prep, or telling clients, hey, this is the show that we've done. And when we're backing into that corner, it has never, and I mean never, gone well for me. Now, sometimes can we say, hey, like, this is roughly when we're going to do it and it works out? Yeah. But other times when it's like, no matter what happens, we're getting this show done, I've just always found that it does not work out for the client. And they just don't bring their best. And it's really unfortunate, because the whole point of a physique sport is not to see who can do as many competitions or when you're going to get on stage, but do you look better than the last time you competed? And it's something that I really, really try to impress upon people, because physique sports have gotten so competitive now, particularly in the NPC, because there are just so many people competing that coming in your best. It's no longer a, hey, just show your face, and if people see you a lot, like, you'll get rewarded kind of a thing. Does that help? Of course. But ultimately, if you come out and you have the best physique there, it's going to leave a lot more of an impression than if you're just kind of showing up half-assing it. And it's something that's where you have to say, hey, am I a serious competitor or am I not? And I understand that some people are just looking to get into it to just see if they like it. But trust me when I say that if you're going to just see if you like it, and you don't look good, you're not going to like it. So if you're trying to say, hey, I want to do my first competition, be very open to the timeline and do whatever it takes to get up there. And then you can truly see if you liked it. If you didn't get stage lean, you might not like it because you're like, wow, I felt embarrassed, or I didn't look as good as I could have. Whereas if you say, hey, I could have dieted for 2 months longer and kicked ass. So that's really why I like to impress upon people, like, the long preps are so important. Doesn't mean they're any easier, and doesn't mean that I'm stretching them out unnecessarily for clients, and neither are you, but we're just being realistic. And if I were to say, hey, Jill, like, you need to get ready in 16 weeks, that would have been a whole mess. You know what I mean? Like, that would have sparked particularly again, for people who are slower to respond, you're going to see the side effects of a diet a lot more. This metabolic compensation that we see from dieting is going to be a lot harsher in people who are already in that situation, right? Because that's who has those issues afterwards. If it was an easy diet and you had no problem losing body fat, you wouldn't be having these adaptations. So if you're pushing somebody who's already going to be slower to respond into a fast diet, and now the cascade of all these adaptations are happening, it's just a mess. So the longer that you can take, really, really the better. And you have to, if you're a coach or an athlete, understand this. And that's where I think it's really helpful to have experience as a coach in what you're doing, right? So not to say that every good coach has to be a competitor, but I do think that going through these cycles and doing things right and doing things wrong is super important. One more thing I wanted to kind of loop back to the IUD, and this is not a podcast on IUDs, but just in my experience with coaching, a lot of times the people who see the issues with the IUD basically will have this kind of pelvic inflammation, and if that's where it's inserted. And what ends up happening is that obviously the IUD is inserted, but if it does kind of start to move and move and move, there's these micro tears, and those micro tears are causing that inflammation. And I know particularly for you, you were seeing this like literal distension that was not something that was just, of course there was body fat there as well, but it was just a distension that was completely different than normal. And I have heard of that with multiple people. Now, like you said, you have some clients who have the copper IUD, love it. I have some clients who have the Mirena, any kind of IUD, love it. Other people can't do it, right? Some people, like I've been on hormonal oral birth control for a long time, many, many years. I have low side effects and I manage it with different nutrients, right? I have other people who take it and they're like, I'm crazy on this. I need the ring. And so there's going to be different types that work for people. And sometimes you're going to have to figure it out. But just as a general rule, I do find that any kind of implant IUD, more people have issues than not. So if you're thinking of what birth control should I probably get, of course, talk with your provider, see what works best for you. But I would say starting with the lowest dose possible. And if you can, just doing the oral. There are going to be side effects, of course, to every different type of birth control. But I would just say that I've seen the least amount of issues as a coach on my end, personally, just kind of and I know a lot of people want to go to the copper IUD because it's no hormones, air quotes, but there are issues with copper that come along. And if you don't know how to manage that, and then there are issues with kind of the inflammation that comes along with the implantation process, and if there's anything that's happening there. So just lots of things to consider. And that was not, of course, the only reason, but it was definitely contributing. And then, so if you guys are thinking of dieting or you are thinking of prepping and you're like, man, I really have a long way to go, there's a few ways to look at it. One, you can do a cut and then reverse again and then be in a better starting place. Or, hey, I'm just going to do this long prep. And neither is right or wrong. But the really big thing I want to impress upon you guys here is, so Gill has a tentative show date. We don't have to share that yet, but that's kind of, it's coming up. But before that first show, we'll have had a very, very extended diet period, right? So because of that, it does not mean that now Gill can just turn around and next January do another show, right? So if she's going to have this long extended diet and then we do several shows this year, which is the goal. The goal is to re-qualify for nationals, do some national shows. After that, there's going to need to be a substantial break. We can't expect to diet for virtually a whole year by the time that summer is over and then say, oh, I'm going to compete again next year. I took 3 months off and guess what? That is where you run into the issues. So I think the other part of the problem that gets perpetuated with people not wanting to do long diets is people want to compete every year. And for some people, that is just not going to be the reality. And I know that you can speak to this experience and you see that with clients as well too. Some people, short diets, little side effects, they can do it again. No problem. I have many clients like that. And then I have other clients who can't do that. I myself can't do that. I used to do that and then I ran into a whole bunch of problems. So at some point it's going to catch up with you, right? And everybody's metabolism is different. Everybody's genetics are different. But do you want to just touch on that a little bit? Like basically if you're going to be doing this long prep, and even if you do that with clients, you have to have that conversation with them. Like you cannot expect to just step on stage again after 3 months off.
Yeah. I've done that also. I feel like I've had one of those like 3 month off seasons where it would have benefited me to kind of just keep in that prep a little bit longer if I really wanted to hit a national stage. And it would have benefited me in the long run to, take a longer amount of time off, just so you're not in a diet, out of a diet, in a diet, so you're not really dealing with any of those I would say not fluctuations, but transition periods in such a short amount of
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And also, if you are someone who gets a little bit food focused, someone who really just
Yeah.
gets, all gung ho, blinders on in a dieting phase, and then you're constantly putting yourself in and out of that. It's really stressful. It's really stressful on your body, and it's really stressful on just the rest of your life. Prep is something that you really have to be in a position to dedicate your time to. And I've turned down clients before who said, I want to step on stage in 12 weeks. Can you do that? I'm like, no. I would rather work with you and bring your food up and get you to a good place before we do that. And that's just a reality of how things are right now. So as much as it sucks, and I would love to help them, I don't want to put them through that if they're not physically ready. So anyone I do choose to prep, I know for a fact that they can handle it, and I know that they're in a good place to do so. So taking a short amount of time off, it may be tempting, but it's not going to benefit you next time you want to step on stage.
Yeah, the main focus we've been talking about has been more of the metabolic and hormonal adaptations, kind of why you would want to do a long diet and why you would want to take a longer off season. But the food focus and the mental state is a whole completely different conversation, and we could probably touch on that on a different podcast. But literally the amount of time that you need afterwards typically to just recover is longer than you think.
Yeah.
Now again,
maybe.
Now, not for everybody, right? There's some people, again, I prep, a few weeks after, they're good to go. Okay, great. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
But for the majority of people, that's just not the reality. And you've done a really good job. Like, you're somebody who's doesn't necessarily have a ton of like food focused issues. So you're in a really great place to where I know comfortably I can prep you and I can push you because of knowing you for so many years and, working with you through these kinds of things, right? But for somebody who might be having those issues, that's another reason it's like, hey, we can't rush this. Like, one, we can't rush the diet, and two, we can't rush the off-season period, because we need to work on your food focus and your relationship with food, because people start doing really crazy stuff when they're dieting, and start fantasizing about a lot of stuff. And there's a difference between like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm a foodie, versus like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And that happens to all of us. Like, I mean, some of the stuff that I've literally thought about when I'm dieting is actually insane. Like, and now, like, so far removed from it, it's almost comical to be like, wow, like, one, did I care about that? Two, like, there's been times where I've literally been driving behind like an ice cream truck and I'm like thinking about like ramming into the back of it and just like eating the ice cream while I'm driving. Like, you just start thinking insane things like, oh, I could actually do that. And like,
yeah.
first of all, no. Like, so many levels of no, but just in general, like, we just start doing and having these like weird food, fantasies, but also just this food focus, and not being able to handle yourself around food. So if you think that it's hard during the diet, watch out afterwards, and it's not going to get fixed in 3 months of you overeating, because that's what's happening. If you're dieting for a long time and then you basically just go into this off season full bore with the intention of only taking a few months off, trust me when I say, because I've done it a million times, you're just going to eat as much as you can, get it in while you can, and then I'll just start dieting again once I get fat enough. And that is not a recipe for doing well or really progressing in the sport.
Yeah.
So this comes back to, again, are you trying to be competitive or are you just trying to compete? So taking enough time to diet really is crucial from not only a metabolic and a hormonal perspective, but really from a mental perspective as well. And then the afterwards can be handled a lot better.
Yeah, I think, the whole mental side of it too is just like super important, because I feel like up until the last maybe few weeks, I haven't felt like I've been like grinding or, banging my head into the wall, trying to get this, weight off. I feel like it's been relatively smooth. And then we kind of hit a sticking point, and that's kind of where we had to amp things up a bit. And now I feel like, yeah, like this is the fun part. Yeah, this is the fun part. This is where I'm like insane and my brain's all over the place and whatever. So it's benefited me in a sense that like, I feel like I've been living my life, just balancing it all. And I'm still doing that, obviously, but now we've just amped it up a little bit more as we get closer to that show date. So it's benefited me in the sense that, for a long time, I just felt like it's been a regular diet, and then, things get aggressive at some point. So it's pretty cool.
And that really speaks to the work that you did in the off season. And that's why it's so important. That's why we harp so much on diet flexibility and having these mental habits set in place with our clients before they even decide or think about dieting. Because when it's time to push and we're dropping the hammer, it's on. And I know I talk a lot about flexibility and, having a good off season and taking time, but that by no means means that me or you or any of the other coaches are afraid to push our clients. I will push anybody as hard as necessary, not harder than I need to, but I am willing and very able to push people. And that's what I do consistently to get them ready, because 99% of people do not get stage lean without grinding. And like, once we get to this point, that's when it's like, oh, we're entering that new level of body fat that is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A few pounds above this, you could roughly-ish maintain.
Yeah.
And now we're nowhere near that, right? Now it's like, oh, we're trying to get under here. It's going to be really hard. And everybody has these different sticking points in their diet. And if you're not prepared for that, it's going to be really bad. And you don't get better at preparing for that unless you've done that work in the off season. So there's a lot of different factors here. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. Message myself, message Gillian, and we can cover that on like a secondary podcast. It's kind of like a follow-up to your questions. Basically, anything that is involved with long-term dieting. Like, let us know what you guys are confused about or have specific things that you're interested in, and we can help cover that. As always, if you have not already, please subscribe and leave a review. 10 stars only.
10 stars.
You know the drill. But the reviews...
less.
Yeah, nothing less. The reviews really do help. Apparently it like bumps things up, and I know you probably hear this on every podcast that you listen to, but I'm going to say it too. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you're going to enjoy the new format. I know that we're going to get a lot more content out this way, so I'm really, really excited. As always, if you have questions, let us know. And if you're interested in coaching or reading amazing articles, a lot of them are written by Gillian recently, go to teamlocofit.com. We have a whole Science Simplified series where basically weekly Gillian will break down a scientific article and write a synopsis about it. It's like 1,000 to 1,500 word article, so nothing too long, but you get the meat and potatoes of it. We have a ton of other cool stuff on there too, as well as coaching applications, books, etc. So thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.